has two parts to it. The first part is conflict in organizations. The second is moral hazard. This video will only cover the first part on conflict in organizations. We want to get you into the right mindset to think about conflict, whether it's in organizations or any place else. And so we're going to look at a variety of different causes for conflict. Some of it is simply personality, and so one example is of somebody who has Asperger's syndrome. Asperger's is a mild form of autism. It's correlated with high intelligence, but the person has trouble understanding visual information, and in particular, whether the person next to them is being friendly or is being mean. They can't read the face very well. People with Asperger's like to be controlling. They like to have a fixed environment, and they like to be the boss. Those with Asperger's sometimes offend others who don't want to be so controlled, so there's a natural source of conflict as one example. A second example is with bullies. Bullying is a substantial problem right now in cyberspace, but bullying has been around forever, and there are many reasons why people bully. Some of those is because they think the people who are being bullied need it. Another is that they have some psychological need themselves, which is expressed through their bullying. The reaction to a bully is either to capitulate or to fight back. In either way, it's a source of conflict right there, and it's quite different from the Asperger's case. In general, it's useful to think about conflict from a Darwinian point of view. It allows us to attach to the behaviors in conflict certain emotions. The fight behavior is associated with the emotion anger, and anger actually brings about conflict quite frequently. The flight behavior is associated with the emotion fear, and fear can actually bring about conflict if somebody else who is hawkish detects fear in you. That they can escalate because they sense that they have a victim around. So the Darwinian approach is useful in thinking about this stuff, and attaching to the behaviors in conflict certain emotions is also useful as a way of thinking about conflict. Here is an image from the movie A Few Good Men. This, I think, quintessentially gives the view of the old style of leadership. Somebody whose orders are to be followed without question, who will not tolerate dissent or challenge to his authority. By the way, this is a great movie if you haven't seen it. And Jack Nicholson embodies this role quite well. It is not the current view of what leadership is about, but it is the old style view. Still, another reason for conflict is that people tend to be too focused on themselves, and they think they're bigger than they actually are. So I like this image a lot. Focusing on oneself, one ignores others, and that ignoring others in a social situation can be a source of conflict. So, just to summarize, emotions can frequently be the cause. Anger and fear, the main emotions to focus on. Once those emotions take over, we are less empirical. We ask less about what is happening, and we just assume we know what's happening and proceed from there. That's typically bad. I want to now turn to the discussion in Chapter 8 of Bulman and Deal. The work of Chris Argyris and Donald Schoen is discussed, and they talk about people having two approaches to their own behavior. One is the espoused theory, so if you interview them outside of the social situation, they will espouse a certain type of behavior. And then the other is theories of action, how they will actually act in a situation. Those two typically are not the same. The espoused theory and what Argyris and Schoen would advocate as the right type of behavior is called double loop learning, or Model 2. And what that means is not only do we look at what's happening, we try to look at the underlying assumptions that are driving the behavior, and we question those assumptions. So double loop learning, everything is up for grabs. Double loop learning is the way to prevent conflict and to actually resolve things amicably. Single loop learning, or Model 1, is what Argers and Schoen argue is the typical driver of behavior in action, theories in action. And single loop learning, people have maintained assumptions that they will defend and not want to challenge, and that is the problem. The theory of management that goes along with double loop learning, I'm going to summarize in one word. I'm going to use a French word here because I like to honor my mom, and my mom was a French teacher, and it's a way for you to remember this. So the French word is écouter. The English translation is listen. Listening is the key to double loop learning. Listening is not an auditory property, it's an empathy property. You listen when you care about the people around you and what they are saying. It sounds easy. It is not easy in practice. It's hard to be a good listener. All of us should work on that. Our listening skills will make us much better in the workplace. This is straight from Bowman and Deal. This is actually from the 4th edition, but I think this table actually exists in there. This describes Model M1. You, as the leader, you define your goals and you want to achieve them. You do top-down management where you unilaterally manage the environment. Your subordinates will think of you as being defensive and inconsistent, fearful and selfish, and you will not investigate negative consequences of your actions because that might challenge your authority. You try to win. Your goal is to win. You do not delegate. You own and control whatever is relevant to your own interests. You create defensiveness in others. So, if you will, you're acting as a predator and you're treating your subordinates as prey. This is single loop learning, or Model 1 behavior. You minimize generating or expressing negative feelings, so you do not want to hear criticism. You definitely do not want to hear criticism, and as a consequence, because you don't allow criticism, you would reinforce defensive norms among your staff. You do not open up group discussion to question beliefs. Everything here is rational. You protect others, but you do not allow, if you will, the key issues to be discussed. So this is Model 1. Model 1 is the unattractive behavior that is all too common. Model 2 is quite different and requires first to emphasize the group, not the individual, find common goals for the group, communicate openly with the group. Everything is a topic of conversation for the group. Assumptions can be tested, and if the data that you gathered seems to make the assumptions prove wrong, maybe you need to change your assumptions. And you do it as an empirical inquiry. So you try experiments to test whether or not the assumptions make sense. Everything is learning, in other words. Nothing is rigid. Things that you maintain are tentative, not absolute. This is me, Professor Arvan. There's no Newton's third law of human interaction that you can read online, but this is definitely something I've observed over the years. If one party goes on offense, the other party will become defensive. That, in general, is not good. Parties need to be if you will, on the same level. If one is being aggressive to the other, that usually ends up badly, not well. Okay, I'm going to skip this Dale and Susan part. We'll talk about it in class, but it typifies what happens when the parties lack emotional intelligence and don't understand how the other person in the conversation is reacting to what is being said. So I have this additional slide on Myers-Briggs. I learned about Myers-Briggs back in 2003 when I went to something called the Fry Leadership Institute. And one of the things that it taught me is that people are okay even if they're quite different from me. There's a tendency for people to like others who are like themselves. And people are different. And tolerating difference, this is in personality type. It's not in your culture or national origin. It's in personality type differences. Tolerating difference of this takes understanding, and you need to be made aware of it. Once you are made aware of it, a lot of, if you will, things that you might find irritating, you learn to be more accepting because